everyone, Mrs. Leaf here. This week we're going to learn a little bit more about the treble clef, and we will be learning about the lines on the treble clef. Last week we talked about the spaces in the treble clef. So let's get started. I'm going to grab my musical staff. If you remember from last week, we talked about the musical staff and we talked about some of those spaces, and we talked about how the musical staff had 5 lines. Those lines are going to be our main focus for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to label those lines with numbers to make it a little bit easier. So we always start from bottom and we go up. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different lines. Now, there's a musical alphabet letter that goes with each of these lines in the treble clef. For my first line, the E goes with it. So first line will always be E. The second line is G. The third line is B. The fourth line is D. And the fifth line is F. I know that these letters are on lines because the line goes directly through the letter. If the letter was in the space, like this F right here, it would be a space note, not a line note. So last week we talked about how face fits in the space, and we talked about that silly kind of acrostic poem so we could remember our space notes. This week we're going to come up with an acrostic poem to remember our line notes. So the way that I remember it is by starting on the first line. I remember that E stands for every. G stands for good. B stands for boy. D stands for does. And F stands for fine. So all together, if I make that into a sentence, it says, every good boy does fine. I want you to see if you can come up with your own acrostic to help you remember the lines of the treble clef. You'll get an assignment a little bit later that you can demonstrate these skills on. Let's talk a little bit about adding quarter notes to our lines on the treble clef. So when I have my quarter notes added to the lines, you can see that these are all on the same line. What line do you think these 3 quarter notes are on? If you said E, the first line, you are correct. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change one of these notes to a different line now. If I move my E up 1 line, what note do you think it will change to? Think about your every good boy does fine. What line will that be on? If you look at the second quarter note, what line is it on? If you said G, you are correct. My first quarter note is on the E line. My second quarter note is on the G line. Now, my third quarter note is currently on the E line, but I want to change it to the B line. What line will I need to change the E to make it a B? If you said the third line, you are correct. And this is what it would look like. This is what it looks like if my E is changed to a B. If I add a note on the fourth line, it would be a D. And this is what fourth line D looks like. That's going to be the fourth quarter note. I'm going to pretend that we're in 4/4 time, so I'll draw a bar line to finish off that measure, and then we'll go to our next note. If we look at the top line, the fifth line, what note do you think will be on the fifth line? If you said F, you are correct. These are all the notes that are on lines in the treble clef. If we start at the bottom, we have E for every. Our next one is G for good. Our third one is B for boy. Our fourth one is D for does. And our fifth one is F for fine. So the way that we can remember that is every, good, boy, does, fine. I hope this helps you in remembering the lines of the treble clef. Bye-bye. Happy practicing.